Senator Rosen. Senator Johnson, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got dueling charts here. I don't expect you to be able to read all the detail here, but a picture does paint 1,000 words. Just so you know, the gold is single adults, blue are family units, red are unaccompanied children. What we have here is 10 years worth of monthly apprehensions. And what's interesting about this, I kind of told the story yesterday with Secretary Mayorkas, but let me tell a slightly different story. Over the last 8.5 years, on average, we had about 30,000 single adults being apprehended at the southwest border monthly, about 30,000. Very steady. What we had in 2014 was the humanitarian crisis of unaccompanied children and family units exploiting our asylum laws. Same thing happened in 2019. Something different is happening now. First thing you'll see, an explosion in single adults. Now, we're hearing this yesterday and again today that from repeat offenders. The chairman's chart showed 25% of the apprehensions were repeat offenders. This is from 30,000 to well over 150,000. Chief Huffman, do repeat offenders account for going from an average of 30 to over 150,000 single adults being apprehended on a monthly basis?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I believe you're correct. The math doesn't add up to accomplish. I mean, there is a significant amount of recidivism folks involved in the Title 42s. We know that.
We have recidivism back here, too, right?
Yes, sir. And going all the way back to when we were counting to 1986, recidivism are in all those numbers. There's no question about that.
So there's something else going on here. Let me suggest where you really started seeing the single adults increase was during the 2020 presidential debates when every Democrat presidential candidate said they weren't going to deport anybody and they're going to offer people free health care. Now, again, if you look at the chart, I mean, there's some pretty remarkable breakpoints. For example, number of apprehensions dropped precipitously right after President Trump was elected. People thought our laws were going to change. We're going to tighten up the border, so they stopped coming. They found out, no, nothing really changed, and they started surging. Then President Trump did real consequences. Return to Mexico was a real consequence, and it worked. It pretty well stopped the flow of unaccompanied children and family units exploiting our asylum laws, and all that we were left with were single adults until the Biden administration. And once again, family units and unaccompanied children exploiting our asylum laws took off. So we've just been nibbling around the edges. This is surreal the last 2 days, what we've been talking about here. Nothing that's going to fix the problem until we actually talk about the root cause. And the root cause is the credible fear standard. It is so low in comparison to what the asylum standard is. Getting asylum is actually quite difficult, isn't it, Mr. Nunez-Neto? You have to be persecuted or fear persecuted, being persecuted on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. That is the asylum standard, correct? Economic migration doesn't count, correct?
Sir, you are right that there is a wide difference between the statutorily mandated credible fear interview at the begining of the process.
And that is the root cause of the problem, right? Because the vast majority of people that come in here, they are coached to say that you're afraid to go home, credible fear, and they get waved in, never to have their claim adjudicated, and we have somewhere between 20 and 30 million people in this country undocumented because of that fact. The credible fears bar is so low in comparison to what the actual asylum standard is, and until we fix that, we're going to continue to have this kind of flow, particularly with an administration that's not willing to do what the previous administration did and offer a real consequence. Real quick, what are those consequences we stopped talking about? I mean, the main consequence is expedited removal. We're still doing that, correct?
Yes, sir. We are still using expedited removal.
So the only other consequence we're talking about is we're not writing down their name. And I don't know, we used to actually remove them like 100 miles or quite a few miles away from the entry point, that was a consequence. Do we do that anymore, Chief Huffman?
Yes, sir. We're still having some interior repatriation flights when the flights are available. We can do that. We are. Yes, sir. That's correct.
So that's still a consequence. So again, so we're still doing some consequences. We still have expedited removal. We're still doing that, and we'll still have that flow. So I guess my question, first of all, for Ms. Mandrala, you talked about disinformation in South America. What is that disinformation?
Sir, thank you for the question, Senator. We've seen smugglers and other bad actors use information, twist information, craft disinformation about U.S. border policies in such a way to...
Specifically, what do they tell them?
We've seen information that would suggest that that certain nationalities would be granted entry without consequence to the border.
Okay, so let me stop you right there. Isn't that exactly what's happening here? People are granted entry without consequence. Last year, close to 1 million processed and dispersed. Another few 100,000 known gotaways because we're so overwhelming Customs Border Patrol. We're not going to fix this unless we're honest. So the reality is, what the people are being told in Central America is largely true. You come to America, you cross the border, you say, I'm afraid to go home, and you are home free. Isn't that the reality, Chief Huffman? Isn't that exactly what the agents on the border are having to grapple with? There's nothing they can do because that is the policy of this administration, process and disperse.
So I'll speak to what I think the agents up front, and without regards to the policy, I'll defer that to the DHS policy. But there's a level of frustration because they believe that many people are quote gaming the system or making fears they may not really have because it's possible to do that. They ideally, though, we'd like to focus those are single adults that we do have a clear path for removal, that we can put into expedited removal. They can have those claims assessed. That's what's well to do. The biggest challenge, as you know, comes when we're dealing with the other populations, such as family units, and that seem to exploit that. And as we go to applying consequences further up, and we intend to, and we have been somewhat, and hopefully we'll be able to increase our consequences of the criminal prosecution aspect as the courts start opening up and we're able to prosecute more cases there. The next concern would be, of course, is that single adults will start becoming family units again, as we've seen in the past.
Yeah, they'll sell children to make a family unit. When I was chairman, we had testimony in $84 a child was sold to form a family unit. So there are no consequences being applied here. Well, there was with return to Mexico, but that was dismantled first day of this administration. So again, we have to actually understand what the root cause is. Sure, there are push factors, but the main root cause is the pull factor, the reality that you can come to America, say you're afraid to go home, and you're home free, you get to stay. That's the pull factor. That's why you have this problem. Until this administration is willing to recognize that root cause, we're going to continue to have an enormous problem, even though the Secretary won't admit it's a problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Senator Hassan, you're recognized.